I think infant baptism, I just want to say, I think that's one of the most important numbers because it reflects whether or not a family is even trying to practice faith at all. Because if you're not going to baptize your kids, it doesn't matter to show up at Christmas and Easter. You're not doing the most, I mean, the number one thing you have to do, baptizing your kids. So infant baptisms matter. They also reflect a certain lag in that you don't get your kid baptized till you have a kid. And most people in our culture today don't have kids to their late 20s, early 30s, sometime around there. So a decrease in infant baptisms reflects a couple things. Obviously reflects that less kids probably being had, which is a problem, but also reflects the faith of people in their late 20s, early 30s in that age group. And what we see is, first, we have to make sure we know the baseline. The U.S. population from 1970 to basically now increased by 60%. So that's our baseline. So any numbers are compared to that. They make no sense unless they're compared to that. The Catholic population has gone up in that time, although we can talk about it in a minute, it's actually gone down since the year 2005, but overall since 1970 it's gone up. But then if you look at the infant baptisms, it goes down right after 1970. These are 5-year increments. It goes down right after 1970, which we can talk about in a minute. But then from 1975 to about 2000, 2005, around that time, it's generally relatively steady. But then, boy, and by the way, it's relatively steady while the population's increasing like crazy. So that's important to remember. So even steady is not good. But then it just takes a nosedive after the year 2000, over 41% decrease. But I would guess there's a number of factors that are involved in that specific decline from 2000 down. I think number one, obviously you have the abuse crisis that became known, is the best way to put it, because obviously it was going on before this, in 2002. That first decrease from 2000, 2005 and on down. I am sure the abuse crisis has a lot to do with it because it makes people realize, in my research, I haven't found that it makes practicing Catholics leave the faith as much as it makes the barely practicing Catholics leave the faith. They were already one foot out the door, and the abuse crisis just made them close it behind them.
Yeah, it's the classic, we go Christmas and Easter and maybe for a confirmation or first communion. Right. But then you have the pressure of, well, they're a bunch of pedophiles. Why even do that? Why even make the 5% effort?
And they either go one of two places. They either go to the evangelical church down the road or they go to nothing.
And here in Texas, they go to the evangelical churches.
Right.
And almost half the people at these mega churches are ex-Catholics.
I also don't think it's just the abuse crisis. I think what we see, the year 2000 represents something to me. It's 30 years from when the new Mass was implemented. And I look at the new Mass, 1970, as a bigger year than 1965 when Vatican II ended, because I feel like the new Mass is when people were impacted. Yeah. In 1965, your average Catholic was starting to see the changes. Absolutely. From 65 to 70, there were changes to the Mass. Things were happening. But it wasn't this huge change in their weekly life as a Catholic. 1970, big difference. 30 years after 1970 is 2000. So what we're seeing is this is the first generation of people having kids who grew up 100% under the new Mass. These are people who had no connection to pre-Vatican II, no connection to the 1960s even. And so I think that's another big factor in why we see this huge drop happening starting in the year 2000.
You tell people all religions are equal. It's all about ecumenism, and we should all invite the rabbi and the imam and all these people in. You kind of shrug your shoulders and think, well, why? Why should I even go to this? I could sleep in on Sunday and then get a tea time. Be a lot more fun than doing a Peter, Paul, and Mary song and being hungry.
That's my next book, which I hope will come out before I'll get finished before too long, is about that deadly indifference. The idea that religious indifferentism has basically taken over the Catholic Church through the ecumenical movement, through the interreligious dialogue movement. And it's true. It's like, well, if it doesn't matter, if the Buddhist is getting to heaven, well, then I am. Right. I mean, if everybody's just going, what's the big deal?
Yeah, if the Buddhist isn't baptized and he's going to heaven, and the Hindu and the Jew are not baptized, they're going, well, why would I even baptize my own kids?
People sometimes focus on the 1970 to 2019 being bad, but look at it in context. It's accelerated a great deal. And one thing I bring up in my article is I think some recent events is going to accelerate even more. The first one is the McCarrick scandal. It was only 2 years ago. And I know that's had a massive impact already, but we don't see that in any numbers yet, because numbers we don't have till later. I mean, the McCarrick scandal, I think you and I both, we kind of jokingly say it radicalized us. It was this sense of, okay, after 2002, that was terrible, but we felt like, okay, hopefully the worst is behind us, that the church is taking this seriously now. At least with me, there was this willingness to give the benefit of the doubt to our church leaders. It had been stretched a lot after 2002, but I was like, I'm still willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. McCarrick, at least for me, that was gone. I no longer gave them the benefit of the doubt because I realized how awful this was. I mean, I lived in D.C. when McCarrick was cardinal, so in that diocese, and so it was just so bad. If that happened to us, which is a good thing, I think, that a lot of Catholics took the red pill, as they say. But I think what happens is for far more Catholics, the ones who are barely practicing, it's a reason to leave. So the McCarrick scandal, the second big event, I think, is the lockdowns. Of course, we can't see the numbers on that. We won't be able to see that for years in the future. But when the church basically said, literally every single bishop in the United States of America said that Mass is non-essential. I don't care how you spin that. That has a subconscious effect on every single Catholic in this country.
That was a teaching moment, and the wrong message was taught.